I knew they were having an affair. The wife of the man Gloria was having an affair with informed me about it. Gloria, my wife, had an affair with a truck driver. How did I find out? The truck driver's wife told me. How did she know? The truck driver told her himself. Why did he tell her? He doesn't fully understand himself. His name is Ralph Godwin and his wife is Janice Godwin. Like many people today, they both owned cell phones and shared a laptop computer. Ralph's local job allowed him to be home every night. In the evenings, after dinner, they typically spent time together before bedtime. However, Ralph often monopolized their shared laptop, spending hours playing games and browsing the internet. Janice also enjoyed using the computer, particularly for jigsaw puzzles, but found it challenging to access the laptop due to Ralph's frequent use. When she mentioned this to a friend, she was advised to get an iPad for herself. This way, she could enjoy her puzzles without needing the laptop, which Ralph preferred to use. They decided to purchase an iPad for Janice. Since their phones were under Ralph's name, he added the iPad to his account. This arrangement worked well for them. They were content with their jobs, their home life was satisfactory, and they maintained a regular, intimate relationship, with Ralph using the laptop and Janice enjoying her iPad. One evening, soon after receiving her new toy, he was in the living room on his laptop while she was in the bedroom. Having just finished her shower, she lay in bed and turned on her iPad. It powered up. But instead of the puzzle she had been working on, she found a string of text messages. As she read through them, it quickly became apparent that she was viewing her husband's live conversation with another woman. The content left little doubt. They were having an affair. Especially damning was his arrangement to meet her the next day at their usual spot. Janice lay there in shock as she absorbed the details of their plans together. Quietly leaving the bed, she found him in the living room, still engrossed in his phone. "What are you doing?" she asked. Startled, he replied, "Texting work about tomorrow." Returning to the bedroom, she picked up her iPad just in time to see him warn his lover that they had nearly been caught. Setting the iPad aside, she crawled under the covers and wept. When he finally joined her, she was still crying, though she struggled to hide it from him. He climbed into bed but kept to his side, making no move to comfort her or bid her good night. She was grateful for that. After ensuring he was asleep, she quietly left for the living room where she spent the night on the sofa, lost in thought. By morning, she had reached a decision. She would step back and learn more about the woman before taking any action. It didn't take long. In less than a week, she gleaned from their messages that the woman's name was Gloria, a waitress at the local truck stop where Ralph frequented for breakfast several times a week. The day after discovering her name, Janice visited the truck stop and sought out a waitress named Gloria. Recognizing her from the name tag, Janice sat in her section and ordered coffee. When Gloria brought it over, Janice casually asked, "Is your last name Johnson?" "No, it's Morris," Gloria replied. "Oh, my mistake. I thought I knew you," Janice said politely. Janice rushed home, opened her laptop, navigated to Facebook, and located Gloria Morris. Discovering that Gloria was married to Paul Morris, me, she proceeded to my social media profile. After finding out where I worked, she called and asked for me. "This is Paul Morris," I answered. "Mr. Morris, my name is Janice Godwin, and we need to talk." "Why is that, Mrs. Godwin?" "I can't discuss it over the phone, but it involves your wife." "How exactly does it involve my wife?" "As I said, I won't talk about it on the phone, but I'm willing to meet you wherever and whenever you choose." "Mrs. Godwin, without some idea of what this is about, I'm not agreeing to a meeting anywhere or anytime." There was a pause. "If you have nothing else to say." "She's having an affair with my husband," Janice blurted out. "I'm sorry, what?" "My husband and your wife are having an affair." "Are you certain you have the correct person?" "I am." "Then perhaps we should meet." I suggested she come directly to my office, which she did. Janice showed me the text messages between Gloria and her husband. But Gloria's last name wasn't mentioned until a text where her husband referred to Gloria's workplace. That caught my attention. Some of their recent messages even mocked Janice and me for our ignorance. The dilemma was what actions to take and how to execute them. After discussing it with Janice, we agreed that divorce seemed inevitable for both of us, but perhaps a little retaliation was warranted beforehand. Not revenge in a sexual sense, we both dismissed that idea, but rather messing with their heads. It was clear from their messages that their affair was merely a physical release, devoid of any long-term aspirations like running away together or building a future. To me, this made their betrayal even worse. If they had fallen in love, it might have been different because you can't control feelings. But it wasn't love. It was just intimacy. That realization left Janice and me questioning what we might have done in our marriages to drive our spouses to seek fulfillment elsewhere. It was deeply painful for both of us. We had discussed the idea of revenge, but we hadn't decided on the form it would take. We decided to take a few days to ponder the situation without letting our spouses know that we were aware of their affair. During this time, her small iPad kept track of their movements. Their meetings seemed random, opportunistic, always occurring at the same motel. The next day, Janice called to inform me that Ralph was finishing work early and had texted Gloria to see if she wanted to meet. She agreed, and their rendezvous was set for 2 p.m. at their usual motel. Janice had pieced together enough from their messages to identify the motel, so we drove there and waited in my car. Gloria arrived first and went to the office to arrange for a room. Janice and I positioned ourselves outside the office, a few rooms away. When Gloria emerged from the office, Janice and I embraced and kissed passionately. Out of the corner of my eye, I checked to see if Gloria noticed us. She did. After breaking off the kiss, we walked towards our cars. Gloria attempted to conceal her face, hoping we hadn't spotted her. When I arrived home, I undressed and quickly showered, which was unusual for me in the afternoon. Gloria entered just a few minutes after I finished, clearly aware of what I had just done. I suppose the fact that Janice and I were together discouraged her from any desire to engage in intimacy that day. She asked why I had showered in the afternoon, and I simply said I felt like it. She tried to initiate a normal conversation, but seemed unsure how. Eventually, she stuttered. "What did you do today?" I grinned. "Oh, nothing much. I took a couple of hours off work to meet a friend." "Oh? Who?" "Just someone you don't know." "Why didn't you tell me you were taking time off? We could have done something together." "I didn't think you'd be interested. You seem preoccupied with other things lately." "Why would you say that?" "Just a hunch." She didn't leave my side for the rest of the evening. She tried her best to cook dinner and then invited me to sit next to her on the sofa instead of my usual chair. When I sat down, she snuggled up to me as close as possible. Later, when did she start touching me? I gently removed her hand and stood up, announcing, "I'm going to bed." "Okay," she replied. "That's exactly what I meant." "Not today," I said firmly. "I'm not in the mood." That night, I pretended to be asleep when she came up to me. She reached out to touch my back, but I moved away from her. I fell into a deep sleep, feeling exhausted. The next day, Janice told me that she had a similar experience with her husband, and she reacted the same way I did. 3 days later, Gloria and Ralph met at the motel again. Thanks to Janice's iPad, we were aware of their meeting and repeated our previous actions, except this time Ralph caught sight of us. Once more, they nearly beat Janice and me home, with similar events unfolding in our respective households that evening. As I chuckled stepping out of the shower, finding Gloria present again, she questioned my afternoon shower habit, prompting me to offer a feeble excuse I knew she wouldn't buy. Their texts that evening hinted that the allure of their affair was fading as they began to blame each other. Gloria accused Ralph of pushing for frequent meetings, lamenting that it kept her from spending more time with me because, ultimately, she loved me, not him. In response, Ralph accused Gloria of craving more intimacy, affirming his love for Janice and pledging never to leave her. He then pondered aloud how Janice and I had ever crossed paths in the first place, sparking a lengthy debate between them about our initial meeting and the improbable nature of our relationship, given our stark differences and apparent lack of common ground. We continued to play this game for 2 more weeks, consistently thwarting their attempts to engage in intimacy. It brought us satisfaction knowing we were frustrating them. Not only were they unable to consummate at the motel, but also at home. However, it was a double-edged sword because we were in the same predicament. Eventually, they gave up. They both decided to end their affair and focus on their marriages. Janice and I had already concluded it was too late to save their relationships. Ironically, the day they ended their affair was the same day they were served divorce papers. Gloria and I were at home when it happened. I had anticipated it and sat there waiting. She tried to start a conversation, but I ignored her until the doorbell rang. She answered it, and I watched as she was handed the papers. She turned to me. "What's this?" she asked. "You know what it is. I'm divorcing you because of your adultery." "You can't do that." "I already have." "But you've been—" I cut her off. "Watching you and Godwin. Janice and I never did anything. We just met, so you would see us and think we were having an affair. But we never were. You and he, on the other hand, met at every opportunity. The motel records show you two met at least once a week for the last 6 months. How did you find out? We were so careful." "Careful?" I chuckled. "Everyone at the truck stop knew about you two. You can't keep secrets like that from people who love to gossip, and your fellow waitresses love to gossip." I subtly implied that one of her colleagues had spilled the beans. I didn't want to reveal our true source just yet. We might still need it. She sank onto the sofa. "Can we discuss this?" She gestured towards the divorce papers. "Discuss all you want. Justify all you want. But it won't change anything. You cheated, and I'm divorcing you for it." "Paul, it meant nothing. We did it for fun. That's all." "Fun? You cheated with another man for fun? Was being intimate with me not fun? That just makes it worse." "Thanks, Gloria. That makes me feel so much better," I said sarcastically. "I didn't mean it like that." "Of course you did. What else would you say?" "It was just an intimacy." That's the second worst thing you could have said. I suggest you find yourself a lawyer. It'll be a couple of months before we can go to court, but we need to sort out the property division before then. In preparation, I've canceled both credit cards and split the money in both accounts. You still have the old ones, I have new ones. I've done the same with the investments. Your phone should have been cut off an hour ago. The house is yours, so I'm leaving. I'm moving my stuff to Tony's. I left my copy of the house key and garage door opener on the table before I departed. The last thing I heard was, Paul, please. I'm sorry." Tony, my closest friend, co-owned the city's finest pizza and stromboli restaurant with his wife, Sophia. I was the godfather to their 2-year-old daughter, Diana. When I arrived, my room was prepared. There was no joyous reunion. Instead, we efficiently moved my belongings into the house and garage before dinner. That first night felt odd. Gloria and I had been married for 4 years, cohabitating for 1 more, yet we had rarely shared a bed. Sleep eluded me until nearly dawn. The workday that followed seemed to drag on for an eternity, and the subsequent weeks stretched even longer. Gloria began calling me from her own phone. After 6 attempts to talk, I blocked her number. Meanwhile, Janice faced a similar ordeal with Ralph, who incessantly begged for her forgiveness. She shared his texts with Gloria in an attempt to persuade her to let him move in. Gloria, however, refused, convinced I would return to her. Janice believed I could be swayed during our attorney meetings. She was mistaken. During our initial meeting, she insisted on private conversation, but I refused. Eventually, I walked out, declaring to my attorney, "Let the court handle it all. I'm not speaking to her." 3 months after serving her divorce papers, we found ourselves in court, and the outcome was typical of most divorces. Our assets were divided evenly, except for her house, which she retained along with everything inside. She didn't contest the infidelity, and I wasn't required to pay alimony. Right after our case, another divorce unfolded. Janice Godwin was suing Ralph Godwin for adultery. Her divorce was granted. She received the house and alimony. That evening, Janice and I went to dinner, and she updated me on their situation, or lack thereof. Apparently, they hadn't communicated in over 2 months. Meanwhile, Ralph had moved on with another woman, a waitress from a local truck stop. 2 months post-court, the divorce was finalized. It felt oddly mundane receiving the decree. The judge's gavel had already marked the emotional conclusion for me. I had considered dating but hadn't pursued it. Instead, I threw myself into work and spent more time with my goddaughter, Diana. I cherished our moments together. Feeling I had overstayed my welcome with Tony and Sophia, I began searching for my own place. I found an unfurnished apartment and rented it. There was a local charity store where I bought some second-hand furniture. The cashier there, a volunteer, joked about recruiting me. I laughed and asked if they recruited all their customers. She chuckled and confirmed they did. So I had very little furniture delivered the same day, but I still needed a bed. The local mattress store took care of that, though they couldn't deliver right away. As a result, I spent it the first night sleeping on my sofa. Time passed, first a month, then another. I'd heard that single men had good experiences on ocean cruises. Supposedly, many single women went on cruises hoping to meet eligible men, so I started researching them. It turned out that yes, many women did go on cruises, and ships were great places for bachelors to meet, if they were middle-aged or older. Since I wasn't anywhere near that age, I decided against going on a cruise. Later on, I needed another chest of drawers, so I returned to the used furniture store. The same cashier was there when I checked out. She didn't remember me, but I remembered her. "Are you still looking for volunteers?" I asked. "Yes, we are." "Are you interested?" "It depends on what I'd be volunteering for." "We have lots of things. Can you drive a truck?" Given my recent experience with Ralph Godwin, that was the last thing I wanted to hear. "Absolutely not," I replied, and turned to leave. "Wait, stop. We have plenty of other ways you can help." There was something in her voice that made me pause and turn back. "Like what?" I inquired. "You could work the cash register like me, or help unload trucks. No driving required," she quickly added. "There's work in the back sorting room, moving items around on the floor, sweeping. All you need is a desire to help people." "Who should I speak to about this?" She smiled. "The office is in the back. They'll sign you up." For reasons I couldn't explain, I walked back to the office. Sitting at the desk was a woman who looked about 90, asking if she could assist me. I learned she was the secretary for the store manager. "I understand you're looking for volunteers," I said. She brightened considerably. Before I knew it, I had spoken to the store manager, Arch, who I wasn't particularly fond of and was scheduled to assist with loading and unloading trucks. I could only work on Saturdays, so they scheduled me accordingly. Our operation involved 2 trucks. When we received calls about large furniture or appliances for donation, one of the trucks would pick them up. I rode along in one of the trucks to assist with loading and unloading. I didn't see the woman who recruited me again until my 3rd Saturday there. After returning from pickups, she came out to inspect what we had brought back. She didn't recognize me, even after I introduced myself. Considering she had only glimpsed me briefly twice before, I shouldn't have expected her to. She greeted the driver and introduced herself to me. "Hi, I'm Susan Blake, but everyone calls me Susie," she said as we shook hands. "Hello, I'm Paul Morris. We've met before," I said. "We have? Where?" "At your cash register. Twice. You're the one who asked me if I wanted to volunteer." "Oh, yes. Now I remember." I knew she didn't, but she was trying to be polite. "How do you like it so far?" It keeps me off the streets, I replied. I saw Susie 2 more times in the following month. We exchanged smiles and hellos both times. 2 more months went by. I went on a single date with a woman I met at the laundromat. It started with a drink after work and turned into dinner. We enjoyed ourselves, but there was no romantic spark, and we didn't go out again. While Joseph, the driver of my truck, and I were picking up furniture in the upscale part of town for a remodeling project, we encountered a family replacing their furnishings. Their daughter was there overseeing and assisting to expedite our work. As I bent down to lift a dresser, she accidentally collided with me while carrying a drawer, engrossed in conversation with her mother. She fell with a loud scream, face first into the drawer. I tried to help, but she pushed me away, angrily calling me clumsy and demanding I leave immediately. Despite my attempts to explain, she insisted I depart. Defeated, I returned to the truck where Joseph soon joined me. I saw what happened. Let's unload their stuff and leave it. We don't need this hassle, Joseph said decisively. We had just set down the first piece in the driveway when the lady of the house emerged. She apologized on behalf of her daughter, but Joseph remained unmoved. We don't deserve to be treated poorly, he told her, and we don't need your furniture either. It's her fault she fell. She should have paid attention. She watched as we unloaded the few pieces we had, placing them on the driveway before driving off. Arch, the store manager, awaited us upon our return. He informed us our services were no longer required. Joseph and I headed down the street for lunch and a couple of beers. Later that evening, my phone rang from an unknown number, so I ignored it. The caller, Susie Blake, left a message. Hi, it's Susie Blake. I heard about what happened and I'm sorry. I might have handled things differently, but I wasn't there. Our GM wants you to meet with her on Monday at 10:15. Let me know if you can make it. Deciding I had no need for their volunteer work or meetings with strangers, I didn't respond. Besides, I was busy with work and couldn't just leave for a meeting. Around that time, I began my search for a house to buy. Susan Blake got back to me on Tuesday to inform me that the furniture owner, who we had left in the driveway, had called to apologize for her daughter's behavior. Despite the incident, she still intended to donate the furniture and would cover the cost of a moving company to handle it. This gesture would prevent our staff from needing to return to move it. Additionally, she planned to make a substantial donation. Susan concluded, "So it seems everything has worked out well, and we expect to see you back on Saturday." When I called Susan back, I expressed that I didn't think I was suited for volunteer work, so I declined to return. Susan expressed regret but understood my decision. Shortly afterward, I received another call from an unfamiliar number with a message. "Mr. Morris, my name is Cynthia Roman. I'm the general manager of United Industries. I would like to speak with you at your convenience. I won't try to convince you to return as a volunteer, but I'd like to discuss what happened and gain understanding." I returned Cynthia's call and arranged to meet in her office after work. I found Cynthia Roman to be quite likable. She explained United Industries' business model and emphasized how crucial donations, especially quality items like the furniture, were for their survival. As a 501c3 organization, they depended on donations for their non-profit, tax-exempt operations. The proceeds from their retail store and cash donations supported programs for learning-impaired children in our community. Apart from a few staff members, everyone worked on a volunteer basis. Cynthia explained that the furniture we left would fund tutoring for 4 children for an entire semester. She added, "We really can't afford to lose donations like that." Thankfully, the homeowner understood the situation and didn't hold you and Joseph responsible. In fact, Joseph mentioned that leaving the furniture was his idea. The following Saturday, I was back on the truck with Joseph. He admitted he might have overreacted. A month later, Cynthia Roman spotted me. "Mr. Morris, can I talk to you for a minute?" she asked. I had time, so we walked to the front of the truck. "Can I ask you something personal?" she inquired. "Sure." "Are you married?" I smiled. Not anymore. Was your wife named Gloria? Yes. Ralph Godwin is my brother. Roman is my married name, although I'm no longer married. We exchanged a look. He's difficult, and I'm sorry for what he did to you and your wife. After processing this for a moment, I responded, You don't need to apologize. None of us can control our difficult relatives. Every family has them. Well, I apologize for Ralph's actions anyway. 3 weeks after that meeting, I moved into my new home, and Cynthia and I went on our first date, which was quickly followed by a second. 2 months after she called her brother less than desirable, Cynthia and I became romantically close. Her physique was flawless. I never believed in nymphomaniacs until I met Cynthia. It seemed as if some switch inside her had switched to an automatic mode in which both body and mind were relentlessly striving for pleasure until it was impossible to do more. There were times when I wondered what would have happened if there had been others around and I couldn't keep up with her insatiable appetite. For about 6 months, we were both deeply satisfied with our relationship. One Saturday, Joseph and I had no deliveries, so I decided to clean the truck. I was at the back of the building, almost done, when I heard a man's voice. You're in trouble, you son of a bitch. I turned around and Ralph Godwin was standing there. What's that supposed to mean? I asked. You're messing around with my sister. I'm not messing around with her. We're dating. You're only dating her to get back at me. That's nonsense. We're together because we like each other, and neither of us is married. I'm warning you, stay away from her. And I'm warning you, stay away from me, I replied, turning back to finish washing the truck. I noticed a head disappear inside the building, likely having heard part of our conversation. When I glanced back, Godwin had already left. 15 minutes later, Cynthia called me. Did it happen? She asked. Did what happen? My brother being there? He was. And you talked to him? I did. What did you say? He accused me of using you to get back at him. I told him we're dating because we like each other. Is that all? Pretty much. Why? Are you sure you didn't tell him you're dating me just to spite him? No, he said that, not me. Someone heard you. Well, they either misheard or they're lying. I've known him forever and he's never lied to me. So does that mean I'm the liar? There was silence on the line. I don't want to see you again and we don't need your services anymore. Wait, Cynthia, I called after her, but she had already left. I went inside to check if she was still around, but she wasn't there. Susie was behind the counter. Who's working today? I asked. Thomas and Arch. Why? Where are they? Arch left for lunch a few minutes ago. Thomas is out running an errand. I left the truck cleaning supplies where they were, got into my car, and headed home. I tried calling Cynthia, but my number was blocked. I never liked Arch. He was untrustworthy, though Cynthia seemed to think otherwise. He was the store manager, along with his secretary, the only full-time employees besides Cynthia. Everyone else volunteered a few hours a week. After a few days of trying unsuccessfully to reach Cynthia, I gave up. Several weeks later, while grocery shopping, I ran into Susie. She informed me she was now the interim store manager because Arch had been fired. Cynthia overheard him on the phone, admitting he lied to get you fired. She confronted him, and he finally confessed about your conversation with her brother, Susie explained. I recounted the entire saga to her, from my ex-wife to Cynthia's brother, up until Cynthia's final words to me. That's quite a coincidence, Susie remarked. Yeah, well, it's all in the past now, I replied. We talked a bit more before she left. Another month passed. I decided to purchase new furniture for my home. I contacted Susie to arrange for the donation of my old furniture and asked if someone could pick it up. She mentioned they had a truck and a driver available, but no one to assist with loading and unloading. I volunteered to help, so they sent Joseph with his truck. Together, we loaded everything, and I followed him to the store. While unloading, we chatted until Cynthia approached us. "May I speak with you?" she asked me. Joseph excused himself and left. I remained silent. "I made 2 mistakes and I apologize," she began. "The first was believing Arch over you. The second was not coming to you as soon as I learned he lied. I felt ashamed and didn't know how to start making things right." We locked eyes briefly before the cashier called Cynthia, interrupting our moment. "Can't someone else handle it?" Cynthia asked. "No, ma'am." "They need you," came the reply. She reluctantly excused herself and went to the checkout counter, leaving me to contemplate my next actions. Did I really want to remain alone and lonely while she sought my forgiveness? She returned moments later. "Paul, I'm sorry, but there's an emergency. One of our trucks just had an accident. Can I call you later?" I nodded, and she hurried away. 3 hours passed before she called. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Yes. A new driver backed into a wall. No serious damage, and no one was hurt." There was a pause. "Can we talk, Paul?" "Why don't you come over and we'll grab something to eat?" I suggested. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I took out some cold cuts, cheese, condiments, bread, and 2 beers from the fridge and laid them out on the table. We made sandwiches and ate in silence. No more words or apologies were needed. After eating, we carried the second bear to the sofa and sat down next to it. In the end, he snuggled up to me and I didn't resist. Actually, I liked it. Soon we kissed for the first time, then the second, the third, and soon we were on the bed and had a wonderful night that lasted until early morning. The next evening, it all started over again, almost as violently as the day before. For another 4 months, my life was almost perfect. Cynthia and I were discussing the possibility of living together. We were leaning towards her moving in with me and renting out her house when Jonathan showed up. Jonah was friends with Cynthia for most of their lives, and his sudden appearance changed our lives. He has been mining gold in Alaska for several years and seems to have achieved some success. He and Cynthia first crossed paths at the grocery store. After their initial encounter, he invited her to dinner, and she accepted, thinking it would be enjoyable to spend time with an old friend. When she mentioned their plans to me, I agreed that it would be nice for them to catch up. Little did I know how much their connection would deepen. One dinner led to many more, and soon Cynthia and I drifted apart without ever discussing the end of our relationship. Life moved forward, but I missed the intimacy and companionship we once shared. One Saturday, while driving near the retail store, I spotted Joseph refueling his truck at a nearby station. I pulled in, and we exchanged greetings. As he finished fueling up, he asked if I had spoken to Cynthia recently. I admitted that I hadn't. It was then that he revealed she was pregnant, and her boyfriend had returned to Alaska. I told him I didn't care, and I realized I truly didn't. Her choices were her own now, and I was no longer a part of them. I briefly wondered if she might move to Alaska or if he would return to town. Joseph mentioned that Susie occasionally talked about me. The store had a new permanent manager. The position had been offered to Susie, but she declined, not wanting full-time work. While food shopping one day, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning, I saw a very pregnant Cynthia. "Hello, stranger," she said. "Hello." We stared at each other briefly. "You've put on some weight," I remarked. She blushed faintly before replying. "Yeah, I guess I have." There was a pause. "How have you been?" "Not too bad. And you?" "The same." The silence stretched between us. "Well, it was nice seeing you again," I said, pushing my cart away. Paul, would you like to have dinner sometime?" I made a point to glance at her stomach. "I don't think so. I'd worry another old friend might ask you out." "That was a mistake, Paul, and I'm sorry. Besides," I added, "what would Jonah think?" "I don't know." I haven't seen him in a couple of months. Does he know you're pregnant? He does. When he found out, he went back to Alaska. That's unfortunate. Well, I should go. Of course. It was good to see you again. Maybe we... I was already moving away, unable to hear anything she said after that. A few more months passed without any specific dates. Occasionally, I'd spot the trucks around town, but Joseph, Cynthia, or Susie were nowhere to be seen. One day during a meeting, my boss suddenly announced his retirement. He didn't give much detail then, but we later learned his wife was ill, and he wanted to be with her. His replacement, Frederick Johansson, was a familiar name to me, though we'd never met. Frederick Johansson welcomed his senior and mid-level staff to a cookout at his house the following Saturday afternoon. As I pulled into the driveway, his house seemed strangely familiar. I had just grabbed a drink and started chatting with a colleague when a young woman around my age approached us. "Hi, I'm Christine Johansson, Frederick Johansson's daughter," she said, shaking my colleague's hand before turning to me. "Don't I know you?" she asked. "We've met before," I replied, feeling uneasy. I quickly excused myself, set down my drink, and made for the door to leave. But before I could get far, I heard her voice again. "Now I remember. You're the guy who made me trip and fall." I turned back to her, slightly taken aback. "I did no such thing. You weren't watching where you were going and stumbled." "Sure," she retorted sharply. I ignored her and left, heading straight to my office. I planned to clear out my desk and take all my belongings before security escorted me out on Monday morning. True to expectation, when I arrived on Monday, I was informed that Mr. Johansson wanted to meet with me. I went to his office and was promptly admitted. "You left the party before we could eat. Then this morning, I saw on the security footage that you were here on Saturday," he said with a smile. "Didn't your daughter inform you?" I asked. "Yes, but I want to hear your side of the story." "It's straightforward. Some months ago, I was at your house picking up your old donated furniture when she tripped and fell. She accused me of tripping her. Assuming I would be fired once you found out who I was, I decided to come in and retrieve all my personal belongings." Frederick Johansson burst into laughter and stood up, extending his hand across the desk. "Paul, I want to shake your hand. I've only heard the story of some clumsy fool trying to harm her, and it gets funnier every time she recounts it." I shook his hand. "It was even more amusing when she told me you were at the party, but you look nothing like the ogre she described." He settled back into his chair. "Please, have a seat." Frederick Johansson and I conversed for over an hour. Most of our discussion was about the company and his plans for its future, but we also talked about his daughter. "My wife witnessed the incident and agrees with you that it was Chris's fault. However, as she's always done, she tries to blame others for everything. Tell me, why were you working for them? Aren't we paying you enough?" I chuckled. "My pay is never enough. But that was volunteer work. And I only did it on Saturdays." "Great. I think it's wonderful when people can contribute through volunteer work. Are you still involved?" I shared my experiences with him and he chuckled. "You're obviously sharp, otherwise you wouldn't be here. That charity you worked with hires tutors to assist kids with learning challenges, but they also rely on unpaid volunteers for administrative tasks, like organizing schedules. Many tutors end up foregoing their pay once they see the impact they can make. I want to set up an administrative office here and have our company sponsor it. I'd like you to consider overseeing that office as part of your regular duties, not as a volunteer. It means you're busy now, but you'll be even busier. What do you think?" "I need some time to consider it." "Of course. Take your time and let me know by next Monday," he grinned. As I left his office, I nearly collided with someone leaning over his secretary's desk. She turned abruptly and we locked eyes. "You are the clumsiest person I've ever met," she exclaimed. "Me? Maybe you should watch where you're going instead of charging around." "Charging around? What kind of phrase is that?" "It means reckless, something you seem familiar with." Get yourself a guide dog to avoid accidents. They're smarter at navigating. Laughter erupted behind me, and I glanced back to see Frederick Johansson at his office door. "Give me a call, Paul. Let's get things moving," he said as I walked away. During the remainder of the week, I was occupied with other matters and didn't have much time to consider his proposal. Initially, I thought I could gain favor by assisting with his pet project, but then I realized that would be the wrong motivation. On Monday morning, I found myself outside his office, still undecided. It wasn't until I met him in person that my choice became clear. I walked directly to his desk and stood there. "Well, Paul, are we proceeding with this?" he asked. "Yes, sir, we are," I responded, making my decision in that moment. "Good man," he nodded. "Ah, shoot," I heard from behind me. "Dad, I can't work with him." I turned around and asked her what she meant. "Both of you, sit down," he commanded. We sat staring at each other. "Paul, Chris has experience in this field and understands our needs. Chris, Paul wants to contribute, so I suggest you both reconcile and devise a plan to assist these children. Is that understood?" I looked at him and started to withdraw my agreement, but he was astute and knew how to prevent it. "This isn't about egos, Paul. It's about helping children who need support to succeed in this world." "Yes, sir, count me in." "Good. Now transfer whatever tasks you can to Thompson. I've spoken with him and he's prepared to accommodate your workload. Then I suggest you spend time with Chris to understand her requirements. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir," we both responded simultaneously. We left his office and stood in the reception area in silence. Finally, I broke the silence. "Where do you think we should work?" "I think the conference room would be best. I'll bring some files for you to review so you can see how we operate." "All right. See you tomorrow morning at 9. "Okay." She left, nearly stumbling over an area rug on her way out. She shot me a look. "Don't say anything." I stayed silent. The next morning, she wheeled in several boxes of files on a dolly. We set up in the conference room and worked fairly smoothly all morning. Had lunch separately, then continued working through the afternoon. By the end of the day, she planned to return the next morning to continue. I explained that I had other commitments and would contact her when I could devote more time to the project. On Thursday that week, I called to see if she was available the next day. She was, and we resumed our routine. This pattern continued for 2 weeks, with us working together peacefully 2 days a week. The following week, she proposed meeting with one of our funding sources. I agreed, and she arranged a lunch meeting. I was surprised to find Cynthia waiting at the restaurant. Very pregnant, I might add. I had completely forgotten about her. Chris introduced us, and Cynthia informed her that we were already acquainted and old friends. "Actually, it was Paul who left the furniture in your driveway, if you recall." "Oh, I remember now, though I had forgotten it was your company." I mostly sat back while they discussed finances, goals, tutors, and other stuff. After they finished and we were ready to leave, Cynthia asked if I had seen Susie. "No, should I have?" "Not necessarily. She's seeing a really nice guy." "Good for her." There was more casual conversation before Chris and I headed back to the office in my car. "Is that your kid?" she asked. I looked at her. "Why would you think that?" "I know you used to be involved with her, so I figured." "How do you know that?" "I saw her looking at you." "What does that mean?" "It means she still wants to be with you." "Not happening ever." "How did she manage to upset you?" "That's none of your business." "She'll tell me if you won't." "Let her." There was a long silence. "The Susie she mentioned, does she work at her shop?" "Yes." "Did you have a thing with her too?" "Are you jealous?" "Ha, jealous. Forget it. Susie and I were just friends." There was a pause before she asked, "I don't see a ring. Are you married?" "No." "Were you ever?" "Yes." "Have you been married?" "No. Why did you get divorced?" She cheated. The rest of the drive to the office was silent. The dynamics shifted thereafter. Our collaboration, already effective, improved further. She showed increased attentiveness, and she appreciated most of my ideas. I found myself growing fond of her, seeking opportunities to spend more time together. Eventually, the workload became overwhelming, prompting me to approach our boss. He suggested partnering with Chris, assuring me he'd manage my other tasks. He estimated a couple more weeks of intense work before I could handle it in just a few hours weekly. Chris and I began socializing outside of work, dinners, dancing, piano bars, but strictly platonic. Although I attempted otherwise, she firmly rejected any romantic advances. Despite this, our time together remained enjoyable until it didn't. Once we completed the planning phase of our project, we discussed informing her father that it now required only one person to manage. As she left the conference room, her father summoned me to his office. Just as I approached his reception area to update him, I overheard Chris speaking. "He must be lacking real interpersonal skills if he's lost 2 women," Chris remarked. "Seriously?" Mr. Johansson's secretary responded. "I feel bad for him, so I'm helping to boost his self-esteem," Chris explained. "Good for you. He's actually a nice guy," the secretary remarked. "Yeah, and he's cute too," added Chris. "He's funny, smart, and fun to be around." "Just needs a bit of improvement?" the secretary asked. Chris laughed lightly. "Yes, he just needs a little work." At that moment, I entered the room. I was aware they had been discussing me, and their gaze lifted as I walked in. "I'm relieved my self-esteem is intact," I remarked. "I feel sorry for the poor guy you were discussing. For a moment I thought it might be me, but I trust you, Christine, to let me know if I need any improvement." Damn. "Paul, I apologize. I was, But on behalf of men everywhere, thank you for advocating for him. If he knew what you were doing, I'm sure he'd thank you himself." I fixed my gaze on Christine. "Since you're so concerned about him, you don't need to spend more time with me. Focus on him instead." She stumbled over her words and blushed. "I came to update your father," I continued. She tried to respond, but only managed unintelligible sounds. With that, I headed into his office, with her following closely behind. "Ah, good. You're both here," he greeted us. "How about an update?" I began before she could interject. "We've reached a stage where only one of us is necessary, and since Christine has the expertise, I think it should be her. That way I can return to my usual duties." "Do you agree, Chris?" he inquired. She glanced at me before replying. "Probably." I never made eye contact with her, but I could sense her gaze on me, and I noticed his eyes shifting between me and her. He didn't rise to his position due to stupidity. "Okay, both of you, take the rest of the day off. I'll consider everything and inform you on Monday. Chris, please stay for a moment. Paul, enjoy your weekend." "Thank you." I left the building in under 5 minutes. It would have been easy to stay home that weekend and wallow, but I didn't. My close friend Tony and his wife Sophia were leaving town and asked if I could look after my goddaughter Diana. Naturally, I agreed, packed an overnight bag, and headed to their house. It turned out to be an enjoyable weekend. I did what godparents and doting grandparents are supposed to do: spoil their charges rotten and then return them to their parents. We did everything she wanted until Sunday evening, when her parents returned, and I headed home. Christine tried to reach me 6 times on Friday afternoon and evening, the same on Saturday, but only twice on Sunday. I wasn't eager to face Monday at work, but I didn't want to postpone a confrontation either. As usual, I went to my office first to tidy up anything left over from the weekend, then to the conference room. She was already there and working, so I turned and went back to my office. Toward the end of the workday, I was summoned to her father's office. She was already there. "Okay, I've made my decision. Chris, this project is yours. Paul, you'll return to your regular duties for the most part, But I want you to assist Chris as needed. Additionally, I want you to help her recruit more tutors and identify more children who need our services. There are plenty of both out there. Let's find them and bring them together." We acknowledged his decision and returned quietly to the conference room. Once there, I began wrapping up my tasks and updated Christine on their status. She nodded silently. When I finished, I headed for the door, opened it, and was about to leave. "Paul." I halted, turned back to look at her. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said." I met her gaze. "No people skills, Christine? Do you understand how hurtful that was to hear? To find out that the only reason you spent time with me was out of pity?" I shook my head. "The other women just disappointed me. You shattered my spirit." Tears welled in her eyes, and she began sobbing before I could walk out. The rest of the week passed in my office, catching up on work without seeing Christine again. That's how it went for the next month. I immersed myself in work and shut out everything else. Then Mr. Johansson summoned me to his office. "Paul, I have a situation to discuss. But first, I want to commend you on the work you did with Chris. Initial results are promising and many kids will benefit. Thank you. I'm planning the next steps and I may need your input, if not your assistance." "Thank you." Now, on to my situation. Robbie Singlob resigned today, so I need a manager in the planning division. The position requires an MBA. You don't have one, but you possess the talent, knowledge, and leadership skills. On the other hand, if I promote you over others, I'll face accusations of favoritism due to the extra work you've done for me and the rumors about you and my daughter. I had heard the rumors. A couple of guys in my department had even mentioned them openly. I had dismissed them without comment. So, I'm in a difficult position. You and I both know there's nothing between you and her, but rumors are hard to quash no matter the evidence against them. Mr. Johansson had arrived from Barnes, a rival company. Even during his tenure as their CEO, they had tried to recruit me. Just 2 weeks before meeting him, they had made overtures again. "Let me propose a hypothetical," I began. "Barnes has offered me the role of planning division manager, the same position we're discussing here. You have at least 2 qualified candidates. Why shouldn't I accept Barnes's offer? It could solve a few issues." "No way. Barnes would be getting the better end of the deal, so that's not an option unless you flat out resign, which I hope you won't." We sat quietly for a moment. "What's the story with you and Chris anyway? I thought you two were getting along." I chuckled. "We got off on the wrong foot, but things improved for a while." "So what happened? She won't talk about it." "It's not important. What's done is done." "Fine. Forget it. You're the new planning division manager, effective immediately. That makes you the youngest manager of any division in this company's history. HR will handle your new salary and benefits, and you'll move into Singlob's old office. It's the only other corner office on the 7th floor. I think you'll like it. You can keep his secretary or choose your own. Let maintenance and logistics know if you need any changes." "Thank you. I'm honored." "Don't thank me yet. You'll be working your butt off. And by the way, division managers and their spouses or guests are invited to dinner at my place on Friday at 6:30, black tie. I'll be there, but I won't be bringing a spouse or guest." "Fair enough," he said. I arrived at his house at 6:15 and was directed to the living room. I accepted the offered house aperitif and mingled with the other guests. Glancing into the dining room, I noticed each place setting had a name card. The one beside where I would sit read Christine Johansson. As I stared at it, I sensed someone nearby. Turning, I saw her standing there. My mother insists on alternating seating for formal dinners, so here I am. "I'll keep conversation minimal," she said apologetically. We didn't exchange words through the appetizer, but by the salad course I felt awkward ignoring her and initiated small talk. Occasionally I found myself stealing glances at her. noticing her attractiveness for the first time. She excused herself after dessert, and I didn't see her again that evening. My first month at the new job turned out better than expected, and I began to relax. One morning, my secretary informed me that Christine Johansson had called to schedule an appointment. I set it for tomorrow morning, but I wondered if she actually needed one or if, due to her status, she could just walk in. My initial thought was that office rumors were still circulating and had reached my secretary. "What do you mean, being who she is?" I inquired. Her tone and manner suggested she meant exactly what she said. I wasn't sure if being the CEO's daughter meant she had special privileges. I smiled at her. "Do you think it should?" She smiled back. "Absolutely." "Then I agree. Call her and let her know she's welcome any time, and I'll see her when I can." Her smile turned into a laugh as she returned to her desk. The next morning, Christine arrived at her scheduled time, and I stood up as she entered. "Good morning," I greeted her, gesturing for her to sit. "What can I do for you?" "Do you remember Cynthia from the charity shop?" "I certainly do." "You thought I might be the father of her baby." She blushed. "I didn't think that. I just wondered." "So what about her?" "She wants to host a barbecue for some of her top partners, and she's invited both of us. I was wondering if you might be available." I started to respond, but she interrupted me. "Paul, please don't say anything like, 'Wouldn't I be embarrassed by your lack of interpersonal skills?'" You know I wouldn't, and I regret saying it. It wasn't true then, and it isn't true now. I can't explain why I said those words, but I wish I hadn't. I think I was just trying to impress Daddy's secretary, but I said it and I can't take it back. All I can do is apologize. I looked at her. She was fighting tears. "When?" I asked. She told me, and I checked my calendar. I was free. "I'll meet you there," I promised. She started to say something else, but stopped herself. The day of the barbecue arrived, and I was there. Joseph was grilling while Cynthia and Susie played hostess. When Christine arrived, Susie took our arms and introduced us to some other partners, speaking highly of our contributions to the program. Christine seemed to know most of the people there. Once I thought I could slip away unnoticed, I made my way over to where Joseph was grilling burgers. We chatted and enjoyed beers until Susie joined us. "How have you been?" she asked. "Great. How about you?" "Not too bad," she replied. Our conversation continued until Christine joined us. "Can I get you another drink?" she offered. "No thanks. I'm calling it a night," I said, finishing my beer and tossing the empty in the nearest bin. I shook hands with Joseph, bid farewell to Susie and Christine, and headed towards my car. Just as I was about to leave, Christine grabbed my arm. "We need to talk," she said. "We have nothing to talk about." "Yes, we do. I'm sorry for what I said. It wasn't true, and I regret saying it." "Fine. Apology accepted. Now there's really nothing more to say." I walked away before she could respond. Seeing her at dinner, acknowledging her beauty was one thing, but her hurtful words, "He must be lacking in social skills, otherwise he wouldn't have lost 3 women, and I pity him, so I'm boosting his ego by spending time with him," were etched in my mind, and I feared they would linger. I avoided her for 3 months. Our offices were on the same floor, but at opposite ends of the building from her father's. I heard she had been relocated to the 5th floor with the accounting team, so our paths rarely crossed. Once, I was in the elevator heading down alone. It stopped on the 5th floor and the doors opened. There she was. She glanced at me, then stepped back. "I'll wait for the next one," she said. I reached out and held the door. "That's ridiculous. Come on in." Reluctantly, she stepped inside, and we descended in silence to the garage level where we each had our own parking spaces, mine labeled with my name and hers marked as reserved. We continued in silence as we walked to our cars. A month later, I was in my office when my secretary brought in 2 police officers, wearing a mischievous grin. "Mr. Morris, you need to come with us," one officer said. I was taken aback. "Why?" "It's for the mentoring program. Someone has issued a warrant for your arrest and you'll need to remain in custody until bail is posted." The tutor program held a fundraiser where fake arrests were staged until enough donations were made for bail. I couldn't pay my own bail and laughed as they took me to a retail store. There I sat with other arrestees in a roped-off area, alongside the deputy mayor and a popular local TV personality who was broadcasting live to promote the fundraiser. During the broadcast, she interviewed me and asked who had me arrested. "I have no idea," I replied, laughing as she pointed the microphone at me. "This is your chance to ask your family and friends to donate enough to get you out of here," she urged. I took the microphone, looked into the camera, and made a plea for donations, though they didn't tell me how much I needed to raise. In our jail area, there was plenty of food, drink, and comfortable seating, and every 15 minutes they updated us on how much had been donated in our names. I was having a good time chatting with Julie, the TV personality, who went live on air every 15 minutes to ask for donations for her bail. After a couple of hours, Susie saw me and laughed. "Who had you arrested?" she asked. "I have no idea," I chuckled. We chatted for a bit until I heard the bailiff announce, "You're free to go, Mr. Morris." Julie gave me her card with her cell number. "Call me and we'll talk about our time served together." I smiled and left. The same police officers who had arrested me earlier took me back to my office. I have my own private entrance, so Shirley, my secretary, only knew I was there when I informed her, which I usually did by stepping out to get a cup of coffee. Just as I opened my door to do so, I overheard her conversation. It was amusing when they came to take him away. He laughed throughout and wanted to know who had him arrested. Pause. "No way. I wasn't going to tell him it was you. He'd go after both of us." Pause. "No. I haven't heard from him. When are you going to bail him out?" Pause. "Oh, you did? When?" She chuckled. "No, I haven't seen him, but I doubt he'll agree to it." Pause. "Well, good luck. Keep me updated." She ended the call, started working, then noticed me. "Oh, you're back." I smiled and confirmed my return, turned and headed back to my office. I had just sat down at my desk when she came in and stood there. "Was everything all right?" she asked. "Absolutely. It was almost enjoyable." She grinned. "Christine mentioned she might have you arrested over the charity incident. She joked about paying your bail if you agreed to have dinner with her." I couldn't help but laugh and assured her that wasn't happening. Her phone rang and she went to answer it, leaving the door open. "No, actually, he found it funny." Pause. "I think convincing him is a lost cause, Christine, but it's your call. Goodbye and good luck." She stood, closed the door, and returned to work. The following day, the heads of the divisions met with Mr. Johansson. As we exited, Christine was waiting in his reception area. "Paul, do you have a moment?" she asked. The other division heads glanced at me. Two of them smiled before departing. "Let's take a walk down the corridor." Leaving her father's office complex, we strolled down the hall. "I'm glad you weren't upset yesterday." "I found it amusing," I replied. She smiled. "I thought that if I helped you out, maybe you'd have dinner with me and I could apologize again for my foolish remarks." "Another apology isn't necessary. Let's just move on." "In that case, will you have dinner with me anyway?" I stopped and looked at her. "The short answer is no." She met my gaze. "That's final, isn't it?" she asked. "You'll never go out with me, will you?" "No, I won't. You must understand that I would never be sure if you were just trying to make amends for what you said, or if you genuinely wanted to be with me." We stared at each other for a long moment before she nodded and walked away. 3 months passed with only occasional glimpses of Christine as we navigated through the building. I called Julie, the TV reporter, and we began dating. By our third date, we were intimate, continuing at a frequency of 2 or 3 times a week, though we were simply friends with benefits. As Christmas approached, Mr. Johansson hosted a party for his division chiefs. I had been there for about half an hour when I overheard Mr. and Mrs. Johansson in the kitchen as I walked by on my way to the bathroom. "She won't come down as long as he's here. I told you not to invite him." "Christ, Lucy, he's one of my best people. He has the planning division well ahead of projections. How could I not invite him? Besides, I like him. Chris just made a mistake, that's all." "You know how I feel about your language, Fred." "I apologize, but your daughter's behavior has caused issues with him at least twice. Is it any surprise he wants nothing to do with her? I know, but she really likes him. It's unfortunate, but I'm on his side." "But she's your daughter? Can't you do something?" "Like what?" "Fire him if he doesn't date her." "Well, for heaven's sake, Lucy, go attend to our guests." I retreated to the living room and lost track of the bathroom. Engaging in conversation with another guest and his wife, I suddenly noticed the arrival of the Johanssons. I managed through the party, occasionally glancing towards the stairs in hopes Christine might appear, though she never did. After a few more encounters with my casual partner, Julie, and some intimate moments, I found myself increasingly preoccupied with thoughts of Christine. On Christmas Eve, just as I was leaving to join Tony, Sophia, and Diana for the evening, I was backing out of the garage when another car pulled into the driveway beside me. Stepping out, I met Christine doing the same from her car. She spoke first. "What do I need to do to convince you?" We stared at each other. "What do I need to do to convince you that I didn't mean what I said, that I'm just a woman who likes a man and wants him to like her back?" Looking at her tear-streaked face, I realized she didn't need to do anything. She already had. "You can come with me to Tony's." She smiled. "Really? Let's go." I walked around to open the passenger door for her, taking in the sight of her legs as she sat down. During the drive, neither of us spoke much, lost in our own thoughts. We had spent time with Tony's family before when we were dating, so they knew each other. Tony and Sophia seemed surprised to see her, though. The evening unfolded with good food and laughter as Diana amused us with her antics. She was allowed to open one gift and was delighted with the dollhouse inside the big box. After putting Diana to bed, the 4 adults gathered to enjoy drinks while we assembled the toys Santa would leave for her. On the way back to my house, Christine remained on her side of the car. Once we arrived, I invited her in, and we talked until 2 a.m. on Christmas morning. I walked her to her car and asked her out to dinner for the day after Christmas. I spent Christmas Day by myself, but Christine joined me for dinner the next day. We had dinner together 3 times that week and spent New Year's Eve watching old movies, eating popcorn, and enjoying root beer floats. At midnight, we kissed. Though we had kissed before, there was something different about that kiss. A sense that it promised more. Despite my cautious thoughts about her earlier remarks, wondering if they signaled genuine intent or mere attempts to reconcile, after our 3rd kiss, I stopped caring about her motives. All I knew was that I wanted more. And though I believed it could happen, I composed myself and sent her home. Over the following weeks, we spent most of our free time together outside of work. During the 2 occasions I met her father, we never had a chance to talk privately, but I noticed him looking at me several times. Our first contact occurred on Valentine's Day. We were at my place, sitting on the couch watching a movie. After thinking it over, I decided it was time. Up until then, she had initiated everything. She was the one who apologized multiple times. She was the one who arranged for me to tutor her, hoping we would have dinner together. She was the one who came to my house, asking what it would take for me to like her again. So I felt it was my turn to take the initiative. We were sitting on the couch, huddled close to each other. I put my right arm around her and she snuggled up to me, putting one hand on her lap under mine. and the other gently resting on my leg just above the knee. I pulled my hand out of her palm and guided it straight to the top button of her blouse. Without hesitation, I quickly undid all the buttons. One, then the next. And here we were on the bed. My ex was good, as was Julie from TV. Cynthia was great, but Christina surpassed them all. The passion she had was beyond anything I could have imagined. During that first week, we must have tried everything. After that intense week of intimacy, the Monday that followed found me summoned to her father's office. "It seems rumors are circulating again," he began. "Oh? What's the talk about this time?" "Enough with the games, Paul. Before I consider letting you go, I need to understand your intentions." "What intentions?" "You've been making Christine pay for her words. She believes you've forgiven her, but I'm not convinced. Your business tactics are tough, and I'm concerned you might lead my daughter astray." "Mr. Johansson, nothing could be further from the truth. Christine is an incredible woman, as you know, and my feelings for her are sincere. In fact, I think I may be in love with her." He was taken aback. "Well, that's unexpected. Have you told her?" "No, sir. I've only just realized it myself." He smiled faintly. "Funny how things unfold." "Yes, indeed. So what now?" "I suppose I'll pack up my things and speak with Barnes to explore other opportunities." His expression shifted. "Why would you do that?" "Because I thought you were going to terminate my employment. That was then. This is now. Get back to work." That spring, Christine and I went on vacation together, traveling to Greece and cruising through the islands. The following Christmas, I proposed to her. 2 nights later, we had dinner with her parents, a tradition we've continued every few weeks for the past 7 years. 4 years ago, we gave them their first grandchild. Last year, their second. We don't have any plans to give them more.